Joining me now is the Shadow Defra Secretary State, Steve Reed. Steve, as the opposition, it's very easy to be all things to all people. But what farmers want is change and meaningful policy to back it up. What can the Labour Party deliver for farmers that other parties can't?
Well, I agree that we need to be clear with people about what would happen. And as we get closer to the election, and we still don't quite know when that will be, that sharpness will increase. And that's what people would expect. But, you know, I've been in this brief about 6 months now. I've got out and about. I've spoken to plenty of farmers, producers. I've been to plenty of conferences now as well. And people in the sector feel really badly let down by a government that they had high hopes in when it was first elected. You know, we've had 6,000 producers have gone out of business since 2017. The suicide rate in the farming sector is higher than in any other sector in the economy, and a lot of farms are really feeling the pinch financially now, partly because of decisions that the government has taken. We all acknowledge the big pressures that have come in the world. The pandemic was very difficult. Ukraine, the Middle East now, Brexit, well, it was the government that negotiated that withdrawal agreement. But there's a lot of pressure on farming now. So farmers want to know, with an election coming, what would a Labour government do differently? And the way that I'm approaching that is Labour wants to offer farmers a chance to get their future back with a new deal for farming. And there are 5 specific areas within that I will run through very briefly because you won't want me to talk at great length. But, you know, one big problem has been the government erected barriers to trade at the borders. So we will seek to renegotiate the veterinary agreement with the European Union so we can take down some of those borders that have stopped British farmers exporting their high quality British produce into markets that they were told by the current government they would still have complete open access to. So there's stage one, money straight into producers' pockets. The second is government procurement, public sector procurement, so for things like schools or prisons, is worth in excess of £1 billion a year. And we want to follow other countries like France and Denmark that have been able to get over 50% of public procurement going into the pockets of local producers who are producing more sustainably as well. That we want to do here to, again, money straight into the pockets of British farmers and British producers. When you're talking to farmers, they will tell you the single biggest increase in costs that they've had has been energy bills and the knock-on impact that's had on the cost of feed and fertiliser. We will switch on a new public sector company called GB Energy that will harness the power of wind, wave, solar, nuclear energy here in this country, more secure supplies than the dependency that we currently have on foreign dictators like Vladimir Putin, but very importantly, sustainable energy that will cut bills as well. So we can cut farmers' bills and cut the price of feed and fertiliser. An awful lot of farmers I've spoken to are trying to diversify. Some of them are diversifying into clean energy. But if you're setting up a solar panels or wind turbine, whatever it might be, many of them tell me they have to wait up to 10 years to get planning permission to connect that to the grid. They're not going to do the investment if it takes that long to get the extra income. So we're going to reform planning to speed up the time from years to months so that we're helping farmers to diversify. It's not just energy, of course. There are many other ways that farmers and landowners want to diversify. And finally, you know, here we are in March. We've still got large swathes of the country underwater. We've had the wettest 6 months on record, pretty much. Large part of arable farmland, crops has been underwater for a very long time. My view in looking at that is that the government has not properly coordinated between central government in Whitehall and the agencies on the ground and local authorities to make sure the work is being done to protect land from the impacts of flooding. So we're going to set up a floods resilience task force to make that coordination happen better. There is money that's been allocated to areas that just hasn't been spent. I'll give you one example. We were up at Retford in Nottinghamshire. They've been allocated £11.7 million over 2 years to spend on flood defences. They've spent less than half of 1% of the money in that time. There is no point allocating money if nothing is done with it, we need that money used to get spades in the ground, dig out the trenches, to put in place the diversionary schemes. So there's a new deal for farmers that helps protect their businesses.
This is all going to cost money as a budget. When it comes to the agricultural budget, you have previously said the economy must grow until you increase the agricultural budget. So how do farmers know you respect and value their role in the economy and society if you're saying you cannot give a number around the budget, you can't increase the budget? The Liberal Democrats have made a commitment to increase, the Conservatives are looking into it. Where does Labour sit on the agricultural budget?
Well, interesting, that new deal for farmers I just outlined is all fully funded. You know, like renegotiating a veterinary agreement with the European Union doesn't cost me, but it does put money into farmers' pockets. Procurement, that's already money that's being spent, but I'd rather spend it on good locally produced produce here in the UK rather than on imported, so that we're putting money in the pockets of our farmers, because I don't want them to go bust in the way that's been happening since 2017. GB Energy, that's investment that's already been identified, and a lot of it will be private sector investment, but it will cut the bills of farmers. Planning reform doesn't cost the state money. The flood defence is actually 5.2 billion has already been allocated by 2027. That's enough, frankly. It just hasn't been spent. So I've outlined an entire new deal for farmers that isn't going to cost anything more, but will shovel in total billions of pounds into the bank accounts and pockets of our producers. So that's practical help from a Labour government that this Conservative government simply hasn't done. Let's look at Elms briefly as well. We had a £220 million underspend on Elms last year. What on earth is that money doing sat in the Treasury coffers when it should be funding farmers and producers up and down the country?
But so what would a Labour government, it's easy to criticise the government, but what would a Labour Party do to ensure there is farmer engagement, increased uptake within Elms, within SFI? What specifically would the Labour Party do to ensure that farmers are enticed to sign up to these schemes?
Well, I think one of the big problems with Elms, and it's worth me saying this up front because I don't want to spook people either. We don't want to overturn the apple cart on this. I think Elms in principle makes sense. You know, we're in a position of transition from the old scheme under the European Union to the new scheme. I think the principles behind Elms are right. What I don't know is the impact that it's having, because Defra is refusing to publish the impact data. You don't know any more than I do, and none of your listeners or viewers will.
But would a Labour government commit to doing the impact assessment?
Yeah, I'll publish it because I've always thought the more open you are with your data, the more eyes there are on a problem, the more likely you are to resolve it.
How often though would it be?
Well, I mean, let me get in there and see how often it's collected, because I don't even know that at the moment, because they won't tell me. But I'm going to get in there, I'm going to have a look at it, and then I can see how it may need to be improved. But that's a conversation I'll have with the farming representative bodies. But in terms of the things we can do to improve it, one thing I do know is that it's incredibly bureaucratic. One of the things that farmers were offered was a simplified system compared to the old BPS. And we haven't. It's far more bureaucratic. People tell me that they have been on farms, or they tell me they have multiple people coming in, giving them multiple forms, inspecting the same thing again and again, or requesting the same data again and again. Why on earth are we burdening producers whose lives are already incredibly tough? The working hours are incredibly long. Why are we just piling more and more bureaucracy on them? There will be ways that sitting in Defra, you can get the civil servants to simplify that. And I won't be doing it directly myself, but I will get the department to talk to farmers and representative bodies to try to get a much simpler system that makes it easier. But within that, there was £220 million not sent out to farmers that should have been, so we can make the system work more effectively that way too. And
in the industry right now, there is real concern amongst farmers that the schemes are encouraging food being taken out of productive land, farms being covered in wildflowers, farms being taken completely back in hand purely for environmental gain. And there's a real concern that the balance isn't quite right at the moment with food production and environment, and I just wondered where the Labour Party would sit on that.
I completely understand those concerns, but until I see the impact data of how it's working, I can't comment sensibly on whether it is or isn't doing those things. I don't know. I know the anecdotes. I've been on farms, people have showed me things that are working and things that they think are not working, but without the data that tells me the whole story.
But if you're hearing from farmers their stories,
Yeah.
surely you have some sort of vision in your head.
As I say it's anecdotal. But what I want to do, what I want to get to, is a system where we make elms work for both nature recovery but support food production. It's very, very important that we're supporting food production in our country. But as a bigger strategy above that, I want to see a Labour government develop a land use framework, because we have we have a limited amount of land for the size of population that we have here, and there's a lot of things we want to do with it. Food production, obviously, is an absolute priority, but so is clean energy generation if we want to get away from dependency on Vladimir Putin and the very high costs of importing fossil fuels from abroad. Nature has a role too. We all want a country where nature is recovering, not completely in retreat. Housing, we need to build more homes because there's not enough for younger people to buy.
Do you agree with the idea of a solar farm taking over a whole farm?
Well, what would happen with a land use framework, because it wouldn't be up for me or any other individual politician to say yes to that thing in that field and no to that thing in that field. There would be a framework which those decisions could be judged against, so that we can make sure we have put enough land in use for food production to meet the requirements that we have. The same for energy, the same for housing and the other purposes that we have. So, that's the way I want to do it. I'd much rather have a strategy than we take ad hoc decisions one by one. As I said, a limited amount of land in this country, a limited amount of arable land in this country. We need to make sure that we are maximising food production, because for me, food security is national security. And if anyone didn't know that before, they know it after, the pandemic, the war in Ukraine and Putin's horrific invasion there, what's going on in the Middle East with the Red Sea blocking shipments.
But do you accept that
if
the Labour government did come into power, do you accept that this would need to be addressed as a matter of urgency? Because it is happening right now.
Oh, I do. I know I do. I mean, the reason I can't give you specifics is because the government won't publish the impact of elms. And if I don't know what's working and what isn't working, I can't sensibly tell you how it needs to be adjusted. I can't open a conversation with farmers and farming bodies to have that sensible conversation. But I do know we need to maximise food production, because food security is national security. No one wants to see what we've had in recent years, empty shelves. People weren't used to that in their supermarket in this country. I want to support British producers and British farmers to do what they do best, and that is to produce high quality food for the rest of us to eat. We actually have a fantastic food system in this country, but we need to make sure we're supporting British producers. And as I said earlier, when 6,000 of them have gone bust since 2017 alone, and when suicide rates amongst farmers are the highest of any sector in the economy, there is a problem, and we need to work with farmers to address that.
On several occasions, you've been quoted to say we need to respect our rural communities and farming communities, something that a previous Labour Party hadn't done. That was your own words. You want to kind of create a change within that kind of relationship with the rural community. When we look over the border in Wales and what's happening there, and there's this distrust that's going on between farmers and the Welsh government, and in regards to sustainable farming scheme, but the agricultural policy, there's real frustration there. Would you say that Welsh government, the Welsh Labour Party, is disrespecting farmers? There isn't that understanding?
Well, the first thing you could say is there's clearly a problem. Otherwise, farmers wouldn't be protesting in the way that they are. But in Wales, I'm not responsible for what Wales does. We would have no intention of copying what's happened in Wales across England. It's a different country, different issues to deal with. It is a consultation. And I've said before, my call on the Welsh Government, and they've said this themselves, would be that they need to listen to what farmers and landowners are saying in that consultation, and then adapt the proposals to make sure that farmers can do what farmers are best at, and that's food production. Now, farmers have got an intrinsic interest as well, in protecting the countryside. If you ask people in this country, across the UK, what they're most proud of, the NHS comes first, but our countryside comes second, above the monarchy, above the armed forces. People are just proud of our countryside. It's part of our identity. It's what makes us British. Our farmers and our landowners are the stewards of our countryside. Of course they care intimately about that, and they should be involved properly in decisions about how we steward the land as well as how we use the land to get out of it what we need. Food is a very important part of that, but as I said, there are other things: energy, housing, nature, all of those things we have to make work.
You say that you're not going to copy what's going on in Wales, but in terms of, you do have tree planting targets here in England, and we are behind with tree planting targets in the current government. If Labour came into power, how would you hope to achieve those targets, and what would you ask of farmers? Because that's the question that many farmers are asking. If a Labour government came in, what would farmers here in England have to do in terms of tree planting?
Well, we haven't published our manifesto yet, and we don't actually have a target for tree planting, but we will want to look, as I said before, at nature recovery in the whole, in the round. It's not one part of it. We want to keep nature working, because ecosystems and biodiversity, all life depends on that thriving. We're the most nature depleted country, one of the most nature depleted countries in the world. We've lost 98% of our wildflower meadows since the Second World War. Speak to any farmer and they know that. They will tell you that they want to steward nature responsibly and they want to grow food. So what I said about a land use framework for me is very important. This will be something negotiated with a Labour government, with all of the interests that different groups have about the land, and we need to come to a point where we all understand what it is, how we maximise and how we optimise what it is that we need out of the land as a whole for the people of this country. Food, it will always be a priority to me. As I said before, food security is national security. You can underscore that in red 3 times, because we have been through things with a pandemic, with Brexit, with Ukraine, that we've not experienced since the Second World War, probably. So no responsible government can fail to recognise that point. But it is not for government to dictate to farmers what they will do. It has to be a collaboration, it has to be a partnership, there will be a negotiation as to how a land use framework can operate, and that is how we build the consensus to make sure that we can get out of the land everything that we need. Elms is part of that, and I would love to be able to say to you how we can make elms work better to support food production and nature recovery, but the government won't publish the data, so I can't. If we are elected into government, and if I'm the Defra Secretary, I will open up that data and we will have a conversation and we will make that system work better.
In terms of right to roam, this is a policy that is a real issue for farmers, and they want to know kind of where Labour Party stands on it. Obviously, we've heard that you want to take a more responsible approach to right to roam, but these are words, and we are coming up to a general election, and farmers are a little bit hesitant. They're a bit worried that actually, if you did come into power, that could suddenly change because there's no policy, there's no legislation. So you're saying that you're going to be responsible, but do they have your word on that? Yeah,
well, parties don't publish legislation before elections. That happens after, as you saw earlier, I've got a couple of staff in the office next door. I don't have the thousands of civil servants. No, but do you understand
from farmers that there is this, it's easy for you to say these words around right to roam, that responsible approach is what you want to take.
Well, where I am on this, I hope I've been clear, but I'll repeat what I've said, is I want Labour to treat the countryside with respect. And that means not just imposing what some people in the countryside might see as urban sensibilities or urban priorities on people who live in rural parts of our country. And that means listening to them, working with them, and making sure their concerns are met. Now, very often the concerns of people in urban and rural parts of the country are the same, but there are differences, and we have to respect that, and we have to reflect that in the decisions that we take. Now, when it comes to access, I've ruled out a Scottish-style right to roam because it would be inappropriate for England. Scotland, much of Scotland is highland. There aren't crops growing, there aren't machines around that can damage kids' fingers if they're shoved in them. England is very different. We need something that fits England, so I've ruled that out. But we do want to work with landowners and farmers to increase responsible access to the countryside. I'm repeating myself here, but people in this country are so proud of our countryside.
So there is a commitment there for responsible
access, but it will be done through negotiation. And what I won't allow to happen is anything that damages or threatens to damage farmers' valuable crops, that puts safety at risk. You know, farmers, landowners do not want people who don't know what they're walking through to walk into areas where there is dangerous
one of the
machinery.
key issues is safety.
Safety is a key issue, but it is for me too. So we'll work with farmers and landowners to get responsible access. It won't be a Scottish-style right to roam, and in that sense, how I'm talking about this is different to how Labour's talked about it before. I'm recognising the concerns that farmers and landowners have raised, and I'm offering to work with them to get to a solution that they will be happy with. And I think that's the right thing to do. I think it's respectful, apart from anything else.
We are running up to a general election. In terms of gaining rural seats, that's something that you really want to do. What would be... It's difficult to give a number, but in terms of how many rural seats you want to gain, what would be the ideal?
It's very hard to answer that question because, you know, we would hope to have a majority to form a government, and that means we've got to win, you know, at least half of all seats, and we're going to have to win them all over the country: Scotland, Wales, urban areas, rural areas. We seek to govern for the whole country if we win, and that means we want to have elected representatives in all parts of the country. Now, if you look at what's happened in the recent by-elections, places like Wellingborough, Selby and Ainsty, Kingswood, Telford, these are seats that are rural or semi-rural, and we got record swings, some of the biggest swings to any party seen since the Second World War. Now, that tells me not that it's job done, that tells me that Labour is now getting a hearing in the countryside and in rural parliamentary seats that we've not had for a couple of decades. In 1997 and 2001, Tony Blair was elected. Labour had a majority of seats in the countryside. In 2019, we had just 3. That tells me something very important about how we were not connecting with those communities, but we really are trying to.
Is there a number that you'd be
people's
disappointed
concerns.
by, though?
Well, I want it to add up to a majority so that we've got a majority in Parliament. You know, we'll fight for every single vote. We're not going to take anything for granted. You know, Labour needs enough to have a majority, but we've got candidates in every seat, and those candidates will reflect and speak to the communities where they are standing. I think we've got a much stronger offer for people in rural parts of the country. If you look at the polling today, it's just a snapshot, it's not a prediction, but Labour is polling ahead of the Conservatives in those rural seats, and we've seen in Mid-Beds, for instance, there was a three-way battle between Labour, the Lib Dems and the Conservatives. It was Labour that won that seat again with a record swing. It's a largely rural seat again. We are getting a hearing in those places because we're talking about the things that people in those communities care about: the cost of living, the National Health Service, crime, but not just talking about them in the way that they impact people living in towns and cities, but also about how they impact people in the countryside. You know, it's difficult for anyone to get to see a GP at the moment, but in many parts of the countryside there aren't even GP surgeries you can go to find out there's not a doctor to speak to. So we have to address the problems as they are perceived and felt in the countryside, and I think that's what, under Keir Starmer's leadership, Labour is doing, and that's what I mean by treating the countryside but with respect.
And you say you want to listen to farmers. So in terms of livestock farmers, bovine TB is a huge issue and a huge stress. You know, you've quoted about statistics around mental health within farming. Bovine TB is one of the pivotal points, a real difficult point for farmers. Yeah. You know, we've heard today that, well, in recent weeks around the vaccine, you know, it's not coming anytime soon. And that vaccine is not going to be the silver bullet, one for a better word. It's going to be another tool to the toolbox, but we cannot just rely on that vaccine. So if you had a livestock farmer in here that has had to deal with bovine TB maybe for 10 years in and out and lost countless number of cattle, and they're saying, look, we just want you to do all tools in the box, including targeted badger culling. Is that something that this Labour Party would do?
Well, I was down in Dartmoor, actually, earlier this year, and I met a dairy farmer, who had TB in her herd. And she was crying while she was telling me what was going on. You know, farmers feel so passionate about their livestock. To see this coming, it's the worst thing in the world, really, for them. I fully appreciate and understand that. But she also told me something else. She said the badger cull isn't enough to deal with this problem, because if you cull healthy badgers and infected animals come into those sets, you're bringing TB to your herd.
But the scientific
what she said
evidence,
to me.
and we've got vets saying in Wales, you know, when there was a protest the other day in Senedd, a vet stood up in front of everyone and said this Welsh Government needs to introduce badger culling as one of the options. He's not saying that's the your only option, but it's one of the tools. And I think in farmers' mindset, they want to make sure that everything is being thrown at this disease to eradicate TB.
I agree that we need to be doing much better to eradicate TB. I mean, last year, 20,000 animals got culled because of TB, 20,000 cows. That's absolutely shockingly high level. So whatever the current system is doing, it isn't working because we've got that. The government commissioned a review, the Godfrey Review, that laid out a much more complex set of interventions that could help to tackle this problem. And the government accepted that report, and so did the Labour Party. They've walked away from it. We haven't. I still think those approaches are the right approaches. So it includes things like better herd management, better management of what's going on in slaughterhouses, biosecurity. Why on earth is the government...
But Shadow Secretary State, are you going to commit to including a targeted badger cull until a vaccine?
Well, I was going to say then, why on earth is the government reducing the number of inspections of what's coming into the country and moving the port from Dover 20 miles inland if that is increasing the biosecurity risk and you could get infection coming in, which is going to damage farmers? That's what's going on. I'm going to stick with Godfrey. What Godfrey says is we need this multi-pronged approach. There isn't scientific evidence that the badger cull is effective. Godfrey proposes that it should be phased out over time, but what we're not going to do is come in and end the existing licences. We will focus down on work to get the vaccine done, because when Godfrey came out, the vaccine was supposed to have already been developed by now. Now, the pandemic was a big reason why you can accept the farmer sector was focused elsewhere.
But at the moment, there's no guarantee that cattle that has that vaccine will be accepted from different countries.
That's right. So what I'm not
there's
going to do...
There's a long way to go.
What I'm not going to do is do anything preemptive. So what we'll do is we'll work towards Godfrey. We'll do it in a sensible and measured way. We will allow existing licences to continue because they need to, but we will look at the whole breadth of approaches that there are to tackling TB, because I understand absolutely, I've seen it in the eyes of farmers directly.
And farmers and vets don't want badger culling to be the answer.
No, they don't.
But in a case when it's proved to be working at the moment and it's another tool without the vaccine, they want to have that option.
It's currently happening too much in the absence of these other measures. So as I say, we're not going to revoke the licences that exist when we come in, but we will double down on the other approaches and work with farmers, because we want to eliminate TB. We don't want it in our country. We need to look at biosecurity and what's coming into our country as well. There's not a difference of opinion on that, and I think we can work together with the sector. Godfrey is the underpinning for this. We can work together with the sector and we will eliminate this disease.
Big issue at the moment is for tenant farmers. So some tenant farmers out there are experiencing issues with their landlords in terms of the relationship, land being taken back in hand, just a feeling of not very nice behaviour happening within the tenanted sector. Obviously there's some brilliant landlords out there, but there is also some bad practice happening, which is highlighted in the ROC review. We have the Farm Tenancy Forum now, but that's been under criticism in terms of not taking enough action. Are you, as a Labour Party, in favour of a tenant farming commissioner? Would you look to appoint a tenant farming commissioner? And how are you going to resolve these issues between tenants and landowners?
Well, first off, I do recognise the problem with tenant farmers. I've spoken to many directly, and I've met with Baroness Rock here in this office, and we talked about her review and how disappointed she was the government hasn't done enough with it. And I committed to her, if we win the election, we'll sit down and we'll look at how and what we can implement from that review, because tenants make up a very large proportion of the farming community in this country. It does no one any good. I was talking about food security earlier on. We're not going to be food secure if we allow tenant farmers to be treated in ways that mean even more of them have to stop carrying on farming, which many of them have done for generations.
And also for new entrants in the next generation, that is a way in for farming.
That's right. That's right. Absolutely, and we need to find ways in for new entrants. Given the average age of farming, we have to make it a much more attractive prospect. Well, for younger members of the existing farming community, as well as people that want to come into.
But are you in favour of a tenant farming commissioner?
Well, you're going to have to give me time to work that one through. You know, the ROC review, I've got it over here actually.
But in principle, the idea of having someone, you know, they're impartial, they're representing both tenants and landowners, but it's someone that looks over the sector.
In principle, it sounds sensible. Let me look to see whether that is absolutely the best way to achieve the outcomes. I want to make sure that we're supporting tenant farmers and indeed all farmers. You know, a lot of the things we've done in our New Deal for Farmers that we're putting forward in the New Deal for Farmers, like negotiating, seeking to negotiate a veterinary agreement with the EU, that helps farmers, whether they're tenants or whether they're landowners. And actually a lot of farmers are hybrid. They're going to be both, aren't they? So I think we've got a good offer for farmers anyway. I recognise the particular issues that tenants are facing. I've spoken to Baroness Rock and we will continue to work with her on the other side of the election. You know, as I was walking back from the budget the other day, Baroness Rock stopped me in the corridor and said, you know, very disappointing that there was nothing in the budget again to support farmers and farming. You know, it's almost like for this government, farmers have just become an afterthought. That New Deal for Farmers that I outlined before is putting farmers at the centre of our plans for a decade of national renewal. Food security is a key part of that, and you know, farmers, the countryside, will be central to our Labour government if we're fortunate enough later this year to be elected.
In terms of when you were first appointed, you openly admitted, you know, I'm new to farming. It's not something that you've really kind of engaged with. So a lot to learn and a very technical brief to get your head around. Yeah. But in these last few months, has there been anything, a pinpointed moment that's like surprised you, something that you didn't expect from the farming community?
If it's anything, it's the passion. I think more than anything else. You can't. I've been out to quite a lot of farms now, and the farmers have walked me around and showed me what they're doing. The passion that farmers have for what they do is immense, intense. The sense of connection they have with their land and their livestock, sometimes going back generations. That sense of identity, of really caring. I mean, that absolutely sings out. What I don't agree with is, you know, when Rishi Sunak, Prime Minister, came and spoke at the NFU conference, he said to farmers, I know you don't do this for the money. I think that's a bit of a misunderstanding of their passion, because you can be passionate about a thing, but you have to recognise it's a business and it's a livelihood. And I think in too many ways, you know, the withdrawal agreement, allowing energy prices to rocket out of control in the way that they did, even Elms, you know, Tenant Farmers, amongst one of the groups that believe they're not getting enough out of that. It's almost like the government does treat farmers as if they're doing it just for the love. The love is fine, but they've got to put food on the table and, you know, pay the bills as well. These are businesses and they need to be supported to be successful and viable into the future. And I think that's where this government has failed, but I think our New Deal for Farmers offers a way through it. How
are you going to try and bridge that disconnect between consumers and farmers right now?
The disconnect between consumers and farmers. Interesting you put it like that, because...
But in terms of that, you know, obviously we have an urban and rural divide, even though I hate using that term. But how do we ensure that consumers and the general public value farmers and value the food that they produced?
Well, here's another thing that's really struck me, because I've gone around a number of farms now, and several farmers have said to me, pretty much in these terms, that no one likes us. That isn't true. You know, I've conducted polling and we've got it from the general public. The public really value farmers, and they think farmers have been put upon and treated unfairly. Now, maybe some years ago there was a different perception, but for today, the British public really value and very highly the role of farmers and producers in this country. They love the countryside. It's part of everyone's identity, whether they live there or not. I think what consumers are perceiving is not a disconnect from farmers, but that the system isn't working fairly for farmers. And where we're looking is, how can we make the supply chain work more fairly, so it's not always the producer who is having to bear the cost of problems in that supply chain.
But how would you make that supply chain fairer? Because that's a big issue for farmers right now.
It's a very big issue, and I can't announce the policy that we're currently working on because we're going to announce it at a particular point. But I've been speaking to intermediaries, the supermarkets and producers, and we are working up proposals for how we can make sure.
Can you give us a little snippet, because there's farmers listening?
I would love to, but we'll be able to come out with that policy once I've got all the I's dotted and the T's crossed. But we are working across the sector to make sure that that works fairly for everybody. You know, again, I'm going to refer back to our new deal for farmers, but renegotiating the veterinary agreement with the EU will support producers, because for a lot of them, the European markets were important to their financial viability and they got closed off. And if you just increase the amount that you're supplying to this particular country, then the price goes down. So that's difficult. Some of the trade deals the government signed, the Australia-New Zealand one, I thought particularly egregious, because here we have, and we're rightly proud of in this country, very high standards for animal welfare and environmental protection. And then the government goes off to the other side of the world and negotiates a deal that undercuts what our farmers and producers are doing. We have to maintain those high standards in trade deals when we negotiate them. So there's another way that we can operate differently and not bring into the supply chain in this country produce that undercuts our British producers.
But how would you ensure that farmers are not undercut and we're not importing substandard food?
Well, we will protect those welfare standards in the trade deals that we operate.
And in terms of export markets?
In terms of export markets, we'll seek to negotiate a veterinary deal with the EU that will take down those barriers to trade that the Conservatives have thrown up and let British producers sell their fantastic British produce into the European markets that want to have it. It's only the Conservatives that have got in the way. You know, we need to tear those barriers down, let farmers do what they do best and farm, and then let them sell that produce, you know, across Europe, across the world, and in this country as well.
One final question. That traditional view that the Labour Party is an urban party, why is that wrong now?
Well, right now, at the last election, we had only 3 MPs elected in rural seats. But in 1997 and 2001, we had a majority of rural seats. Labour lost connection with the countryside. Under Keir Starmer's leadership, we want to win that connection back. We know from recent by-elections we're getting a hearing that we haven't had in recent years. We're going to have a candidate in every single seat, but all of them will be focusing on the issues as they affect rural communities, including farming communities. We will listen with respect and we will offer partnership in a government moving forward where farmers and producers will be part of the decisions that we're taking. So unlike with the current government, we can make sure that we have a government that backs farmers rather than undermines them.
And for farmers deliberating on that ballot paper, in terms of a point of difference, one point of difference that you can offer the agricultural community, what is it?
It's the new deal for farmers that I've outlined. I won't go through it again, but we've got a package that is going to put money directly into the pockets and bank accounts of farmers and producers, whereas this government has undermined them. There is a very, very big point of difference in that. And, you know, I've gone through it all already and I probably shouldn't go through it again, but farmers are going to get a real choice, and it's about the future of this country, but also the future of farming. It's going to be an interesting election when it comes. It's a shame that the Prime Minister's ruled it out on the 2nd of May because I want to have that debate and I want to know where we're moving forwards for the next 5 years. Will it be more of the same we've had for the last 14 years, or will it be the change this country desperately needs? Well, you know, farmers will be amongst the people that will take that decision. Just
out of interest, if there was a Labour government, would you want to continue your role as Defra Secretary?
I love this job. I absolutely adore it. You know, there's such passion. It's so important. Food production, the countryside, it's fundamental to everything that we are as a country, as a society. So, you know, it's not my call. No. That'll be up to Keir Starmer if he's Prime Minister. But if I get a say in it, if I get asked, this is the job I'd want.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.